Welcome to the XBP Insights podcast. My name is Pavel Pavlovsky, and today we'll be unpacking one of the most important conversations happening in public sector operations right now: the return on investment of document automation. Here is a number to start with. According to the latest Everest Group research, organizations that deploy intelligent document processing in the public sector 155% return in year 2 and 223% by year 3. For every dollar invested, the cumulative return is roughly $2.60. So those are big numbers. And over the next 25 minutes, we're going to break down exactly how that happens, what it looks like in practice, and how any agency can start seeing results in 90 days. I have 3 people with me today who live and breathe this work across 3 very different parts of XBP Global. Ceasar Casas is our Senior Vice President and Practice Group Leader for the public sector. Ceasar has spent years working directly with government agencies on large-scale document automation, including digitizing hundreds of millions of pages for the Document of Veterans Affairs and other federal agencies. Ceasar, great to have you here.
Hello, glad to be here today to share with you a few experiences in this exciting world of intelligent document processing in the public sector.
Thank you, Ceasar. Vitalie Robu is the president of the XBP Europe. Vitalie leads operations across European markets where document automation is reshaping how public institutions and enterprise handle everything from regulatory filings to a cross-border compliance. Vitalie, welcome.
Thank you, Pavel. Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I will be very happy to share a few insights and the experience that we have in Europe on data processing and using intelligent data processing.
And Lakshmi Narayanan is the president of Bills and Payments. Lakshmi oversees one of the highest volume document processing environments in the enterprise world. And his perspective on how automation scales across industries is going to add a really valuable layer in this conversation. Lakshmi, glad you're here.
Hello, everyone. This is exciting. IDP is a game changer and is an industry agnostic AI powered system designed to automate the handling of documents by capturing, classifying, extracting, and validating data. Excited to talk about some case studies today. Real exciting. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshmi. So here is what I want you to walk away with by the end of this episode. 1, a clear understanding of why document automation delivers the ROI it does. 2, the specific behind it straight from independent research. And 3, a practical roadmap to see real results in only 90 days. Let's get into it. So, Ceasar, you walk into government agencies all the time. Before we talk about solutions, I want to understand the problem. When you sit down with a public sector leader for the first time, what does document processing actually look like on the ground?
The first-hand reality is that many federal agencies are deeply document-driven. Yes, even today in the year 2026, take the VA as an example. We process approximately about 300 million pages a year. Many military files that go back decades. That's a large number of documents and a lot of work and backlogs. The consequence of this persistent backlog and the manual retrieval process that may impact the time and how we serve this U.S. veterans, with their files that may be sitting in a warehouse to be manually retrieved for whatever service they may be applying to, whether it would be medical or something else. The Everest Group bring a great reference to for how IDP has really come in to improve the access to these documents through automation and digitization.
Well, that's a staggering scale. Vitalie, you lead XBP Europe. Is that a uniquely American problem, or do you see the same patterns in the European public institutions as well?
No, not at all. This is definitely not a uniquely American problem. We see the same pattern across European countries. And in some ways, we can see it even more complex. Many public institutions are still operating with a mixture of paper, archive scanned images, email attachments, legacy systems, and manual review steps. So the difference in Europe is that you often add multilingual documents, country-specific regulations, GDPR requirements, and cross-border workflows into the same operating environment. So a good example is the way public sector organizations handle citizens' records, regulatory submissions, or case documentation. The information may arrive in different formats and languages, but it still needs to be classified, validated, stored securely, and made available to the right person at the right time. When that is done manually, it creates delay, cost, and risk. Intelligent document processing platform powered by AI helps by turning those documents into structured, searchable data and by creating a more consistent process across locations and jurisdictions.
Thanks, Vitalie. So this shows a clearly global pattern. Lakshmi, your world is bills and payments. Different sector entirely, right? So it is an underlying problem that also lies under the same subject.
Yeah, that's correct, Paul. Great articulation by Vitalie and Caesar. The pattern holds across industries, right? So IDP solves problems across industry. Look at a high volume invoices, payment reconciliation, vendor documents, the same bottlenecks, same errors, same cost pressure. The technology solves this in the government, solves it everywhere. In the bills and payments world, the key result area is faster payments. That's the outcome every bank or every banking and financial industry is looking for. IDP improves core functional pillars, namely capture and classify, automatically identifying documents and improved decision making UI using the AI, data extraction, pulling critical fields and values directly into enterprise systems, adding interoperability. Third point, validation, ensuring data accuracy through automated rules and a human in the loop audit for compliance. And the fourth point is insights, leveraging tools like Athena and data visualization and AI driven trends. More importantly, IDP enables improved cycle time in the process using AI driven decision making, and this has become a great growth story for every cross functional platforms, etc.
Thank you, Lakshmi. So the problem is clear, and it's everywhere practically. Let's talk about what actually fixes it. So the Everest report maps intelligence document processing across the entire public sector value chain. Caesar, where does this technology create the biggest impact?
Well, information accessibility, first of all, the speed of information. Once the information is digitized, not only can you access it from anywhere, but from any location or locations of the agency. But as you apply IDP, you can search the information by different parameters the agency has actually established. Let it be by the record number, the date of birth, the name, the location, etc. One of the great benefits of IDP is the ability to classify the information depending on the need. And the level of accuracy is really astounding. And through the application of AI, we can detect data anomalies, defects on the data that can further help to create more accurate records.
Okay, so when you say the information is digitized, what actually happens to that document from the moment it arrives? Walk me through it like I'm the person receiving it, please.
Well, here's how IDP typically works, with an IDP, environment. First, the document is captured from multiple intake channels. And then second, the platform has to classify this document, whether it's on an application or supporting evidence or financial record. And the third, you have to, it extracts the key information needed for processing and then the information has to be validated, and then the work has to either be routed automatically or be sent to a person or for an exception. And then finally, the structured data or the associated documents had to be integrated into a downstream workflow or system of record. That's really how agencies move from manual document handling it into a more intelligent, traceable, and trackable and scalable process.
Thank you, Ceasar. Vitalie, procurement automation is a big topic in Europe. What are you seeing on that front?
Procurement and invoice automation are very strong use cases in Europe because they sit at the intersection of operational efficiency, compliance, and financial control. And what Ceasar described a few moments ago in the public sector applies directly here as well in the European environment, of course. So documents arrive from multiple channels. They need to be classified correctly. The key data needs to be extracted, and exceptions need to be routed to the right team. In procurement, the challenge is not only to process an invoice faster. Some of this has been already addressed by many European governments by moving the paper invoicing to electronic invoices, and this has become a mandatory requirement, a transition for all the enterprises in many European countries. However, it is also about matching purchase orders, any other data or documents, validating the supplier data, checking approval rules, detecting missing information, maintaining a complete audit trail for finance control purposes. In a European context, that can also mean handling multiple languages, tax rules, invoicing standards, various currencies, local compliance, etc. We can go on this. So IDP gives the organizations the ability to standardize the process without losing the flexibility required by each country or business unit or enterprise. That is where the real value comes from. It's speed, accuracy, visibility, and control.
Agreed, Vitalie. Thank you. And Lakshmi, the invoice processing use case must feel very familiar from your world, right?
Yes, that's correct. So if you look at the key principles that apply across industries, we talked about key result areas, faster payments, right? So that's the outcome that everyone are expecting. And I wanted to touch on key 4 business value this IDP is delivering. One, precision, high quality delivery, right? So quality is a qualifier across every process, every industry. Scalability, adjust computing power to meet high volume demands without increasing human labor. This is exactly what every industry, every organization is looking at, which IDP delivers. Third, efficiency, reduces operational costs and eliminates manual processing bottlenecks. I think it reduces handoffs and improvises the seamless processing. And not the least, right? Compliance, full audit trail and meets rigorous standards like HIPAA, GDPR, and PCI DSS. Right? IDP enables hyper automation integration, which XBP does for many years, which is considered as one of the most integral technologies for hyper automation and employee experience strategies. I think it's an exciting time using IDP, which augments with many other platforms, third-party platforms, in-house platforms, which organizations are taking benefit of.
That's very clear, Lakshmi. Thank you. So, all right, we understand the problem and we understand what technology does. Now, let's talk about the part every CFO and CIO wants to hear, the math behind it. The Everest report includes a detailed ROI model for a hypothetical national tax authority. Ceasar, would you please walk us through the numbers?
Well, the ROI model presents a scenario, where the tax authority or the agency, processes about 7 million tax forms annually. The volume will grow at scale about 7.5 million to 8 million in year 2 and 3, respectively. With the baseline about 900 FTEs involved in the tax form processing. With the productivity of each handling approximately about 7,600 tax forms per year, which requires about, 0.25 of an hour, about 15 minutes, per tax form, assuming about 40 hours per week and 48 working weeks in a year. The IDP works for allocation. The FTEs actually, supporting the IDP are, they spend about 33% of their time on IDP related activities. There are some cost related assumptions that, that should be mentioned as the initial solution development costs, licensing costs, the maintenance cost, infrastructure and hosting, and then the people cost. Definitely, the automation gains, and then the legacy systems and tools retirement gains, and then of course the cost savings and some of the sub benefits that that probably would assume about 20% of the hard benefits. So how do we approach that? We gotta have to calculate that cost and see the gross benefit of deploying this IDP on the tax forms and processing in year one. And then, that benefit thereby by subtracting the setup, licensing, and everything I just mentioned. You will be able to see that in the Everest report, the benefit are substantial. The ROI being at 88% in year one, and 155% in year two, and year three, 223%. So you can see those numbers are really impressive, really, really impressive. So what's going to be that outcome? And of course, cost, benefit, ROI, depending on organizational size. But, the ROI improvement over time is going to be the primary, driven, by increasing the USTP rates, enhancing those STP performance without significant additional investment. That's going to be the key level of sustaining a long-term ROI growth in this case.
So to be clear, Ceasar, the Everest research shows that for every dollar invested in document automation, organizations are seeing roughly $2.60 back for every 3 years, right?
That's the one, right?
All right. Thank you. Vitalie, does this ROI pattern hold in what you see across European operations as well?
Fully in agreement. The ROI pattern absolutely aligns in Europe too. And the business case, like it was described earlier, is often broader than pure labor savings. So productivity is important, of course, but many organizations, including in Europe, also place significant value on compliance, traceability of data protection, and service resilience on a long term. So when you reduce the manual handling and improve the accuracy of the data or the output data, you create a reliable audit trail and you are reducing operational risks as well as cost at the same time. If a process can automatically recognize, classify, and extract information from documents in various languages and formats, the organization can scale much more efficiently across the countries and they can grow. You don't need to rebuild the operating model for every market. So it becomes a sample which can be scalable, and the ROI compounds because the platform gets better over time. So straight through processing improves, exceptions reduce, and people can focus on higher value work rather than repetitive document review.
Thank you, Vitalie. And Lakshmi, in the bills and payments world, is the same?
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. I think Vitalie articulated it very well. So if you look at this is an exciting ROI is an exciting part of this discussion, and I love that. So at XBP, if you see, we have seen 5x in productivity improvement with improved cycle time. And the key catalyst for the fast payment goal every financial institution is looking for, IDP enables that. In XBP, 700 million payments go through IDP day in and day out and enable faster payments for our own customers. In terms of headcount numbers, right? So if you operate with 200 plus resources, now you would need just 40 people to do the final exception and whatnot, right? So that's exactly what IDP is transforming this world. So it's basically you can redeploy your resources to a better opportunity and whatnot. IDP augments with third-party platforms as at customer end for a plug and play and seamless add-on to several of our bank customers. And IDP, along with XBP's own platform, has ensured efficiency in decision making. And this is great story to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lakshmi. The hard numbers are compelling. But the report also talks about benefits that are harder to put a number on. So, Caesar, maybe you can lighten us. What are those?
Well, there are several benefits. Employee productivity. So freeing staff for other citizen-facing work. Improve the compliance and audit trails. The operation resiliency and enhancing the citizen and the employee experience. The most important to me is the ability to free the staff to take care of citizens' questions and improving the customer experience.
Okay, so the ROI is clear, but here is where a lot of agency get stuck. They worry about the risk, the security, about how long it takes to see the results. So this Everest report includes a 90-day pilot roadmap specifically designed for public sector organizations, right? Caesar, can you help us? How does it work?
Well, there's always concerns, right? But, a tightly scope of a 90-day pilot, enables the agencies to validate, the value pretty quickly, the risk, the adoption, and then build organizational confidence before you start scaling. So Exhibit 5 of the Everest report actually describes the roadmap that is going to translate those key factors in a practical and time-bound execution plan. Now, I'll probably mention, kind of a high level some of those points, but, and at day, 0 to 30, you got to scope, you got to line, and you got to prepare, make sure the stakeholders are set up. And in the setup for the pilot is going to be a measurable success. And then, in the second month, day 31 to 60, you can build, start integrating and validating, pretty much implement the IDP and bring in the value, realization. And then on the last 30 days, 61 to 90, you start measuring, optimizing, and scaling the readiness, and implement IDP, and then begin the realization of it.
Thank you, Caesar. But this is a very clear roadmap in a timeline. But what is the most common mistake agencies make when they start this process?
Well, very common mistakes that they try to start automating. They want to try to automate everything at once. Just got to pick one project, one process, start small, make sure that you have the right buy-in from executives, and then picking two compass of a case, use the case for the first pilot, it may be ended up being too complex.
Thanks, Caesar. Let's hear another perspective. Vitalie, can you share an example of a pilot that worked well in the European context?
Yes, of course. And I can share also the entire projects that work very well, not just the pilot, but we have plenty of those examples. But very important is to get it right from the beginning, as Caesar has laid out the process before and the stages. It's crucial to ensure that to follow that path, and then obviously the success is imminent. But to be more specific, in the European context, we had a chance to deal with very large projects in the UK with projects related to digitization of the individual documents by the His Majesty Passport Office in the UK, where we had to digitize very old, very poor quality documents. So to extract that information. And other projects we are dealing with are large utilities companies in Europe and healthcare and government agencies. What's common, it's all these organizations are still dealing or processing a high volume of paper-based forms related to customer requests, like they need an address change or they need some changes which need to be processed. So the consumer or the business has to fill in by hand those forms, or they are filled in many years ago, and then there is another form on top of that. So and they contain because there is a lot of handwritten information and it's always or often inconsistent, it's very difficult for a human eye to read it accurately. So this is where technology comes to help. To address this, we connected our client database to the AI-driven IDP platform and introduced the additional validation layer, especially at the start when we were doing the pilot or implementing the project, rather than relying on AI in isolation. So we use it as an assisted tool, feeding it with structured client-owned data. So it operates with a richer, more accurate context than a generic model that we could use or we could have done. So we deliberately leverage a more specialized, smaller language model, smaller AI language model approach rather than a broad LLM, because that one is not integrated with the client data and is not having access to the experience that we have kind of gathered over decades. And in this context, so our approach combines this AI with over 20 years of proven document processing capabilities, particularly the segmentation and structure recognition of the data. So this allows us to correctly interpret complex layouts. For example, cases where handwritten entries are overprinted with system-generated text. So where key fields such as names appear in a non-linear form. To give you an example, if there is, in some instances, there could be a line which a generic LLM could interpret as a line, while if the AI that we power on our IDP platform is having the experience, they will see that this is related to a particular kind of name or definition. So where a standard large language model for artificial intelligence might fail to correctly associate related data points, we can disaggregate and we can intelligently recombine them to reconstruct accurate structured information. Of course, we have to start with a smaller volume, or we start in stages, so then we can educate, if I may say so, the AI which is on top of IDP platform. So the key point that I wanted to mention here, at any stage of the project, but particularly important in the pilot stage, is applying AI, but training and guiding it within a controlled domain-specific framework. So making it more experienced and purpose-built for the task rather than relying on generic capabilities. This way, we can achieve very high automation rate, we can achieve exceptional results, and the speed and accuracy is incredible.
Very descriptive, Vitalie. Thank you. And Lakshmi, from the bills and payment side?
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. So I like how Caesar and Vitalie articulated, right? So we need to start somewhere. And again, Vitalie, the HMPO case study is awesome. Kudos to you and your team. So I think let me give some two case studies here, right? First case study, how XBP implemented IDP internally. Basically the challenges that we faced before implementation was how do we handle a situation where a human labor was addressing, when there is a snowstorm or hurricane, right? So the manpower, it was a manpower dependent, auto classifying process. So basically we brought in IDP where an automation can improve the classification instead of a human labor. So that transformed the process, and look what we are doing with bills and payments. It's a 24/7, 365 day environment, and we had to be seamless with our process, and we cannot have any showstopper for any event, right? So this IDP enabled a decision making in environment using AI and technology that redeployed our resources to a strategic area where we need their help instead of dependent manual classifying, and as Vitalie articulated, right? So we had ton of documents coming in every day that need to be manually classified. So now this IDP has enabled a cycle time improvement and a faster payment. That is the goal. And we delivered greater results. And as I mentioned in the earlier conversation, we delivered 5x productivity or improvement with what we have been doing. And on an external case study too, right, we enabled one of a top 8 bank who was struggling with all manual labor. So what we did was we did a phased approach. Phase one, we coordinated with bunch of their external platforms to augment with IDP. See, look what we have delivered with XBP's IDP platform, right? So basically, we have an adapter that can go into any third-party platform. That's the beauty of how we deploy IDP. So we completed a phase one, adding more confidence with quality as a qualifier. Now we did move to phase two, which helped them enable probably 500 plus resources at their end who was doing manual labor to a better redeployment. So I think that's the beauty of IDP. So let's start somewhere. And absolutely, this is going to help the industry. And this is a game changer, guys.
That sounds amazing, Lakshmi. Thank you. But before we wrap up, the Everest report talks about what comes next in the space. So, Caesar, what should the agencies be watching for?
Well, generative AI is making IDP smarter. Summarizing, translating, natural language querying, the agentic AI as the next step. Autonomous agents completing the end-to-end processes. The agency that start now, to build on a platform that keeps getting more capable. Integrating of generative AI for deeper document intelligence. The emergence of agentic AI for autonomous process execution, and then the development of domain-specific and pre-trained models. That would increasing the focus on responsible AI with data security and it to be able to be audited.
Thanks, Caesar. So, let me bring this together. The Everest Group research, an independent study of document automation in the public sector, shows a cumulative benefits of 2.6 times the cost of implementation, with ROI reaching over 223% by year 3. And you can start seeing real, measurable results in 90 days with a focused pilot. If anything in this conversation resonated with the challenges you face in your organization, we would love to hear from you. There is a link in the show notes to book a conversation with XVP Global Team. So, yes, just give us a call. Caesar, any final thoughts?
Well, like my colleagues Vitalie and Lakshmi said, we have done this at scale with several agencies and for several decades. Delivering results that ultimately it is not just about improving the agency's service, but really improving how these agencies service our veterans and our citizens. And that's what we do with public sector, right? And if your organization is you're sitting on a mountain of manual document processing, definitely a 30-minute conversation, we can map out how those first 90 days will look like. That's really all it takes to get started.
Exactly. So thank you, Caesar, Vitalie, Lakshmi, and thank you all for listening. If you found this valuable, share it with someone on your team who's thinking about this problem. And we'll see you the next time. Thank you.